Brought to you by Charity Mobile. Switch to the phone company that supports your beliefs. All plans start under $50 before taxes and surcharges. Use promo code TRADITION at CharityMobile.com for a special offer.
The new data on conversions and receptions into the church are out, and on the surface, they look good on the surface. Let's take a look here, because this is being published not by some rad-trad outlet, but here by the Catholic World Report, which is a pretty mainstream Catholic news outlet. Under the headline, Conversions and Receptions into the Church, a look at the numbers. It looks pretty good, you would think, that if taken in isolation, the numbers don't sound bad. Except, I'll remind you of a number I'll bring back to you here in a minute, that it seems that for every one adult conversion into the faith, there are 9 cradle Catholics leaving. We don't know how many of them return to the faith later in life. Some people dispute this. That's fine. They can dispute it. I don't see how you can dispute it when it seems like your most typical parish mass on a Sunday is largely empty or half full, and the average age is really high compared to more traditionally minded and traditionalist parishes. Here are the details. According to data published in the 2024 edition of the official Catholic Directory, 619,775 people entered the Catholic Church in the Latin Rite dioceses of the U.S. during the previous year. The directory classified 480,905, or 77.6% of them, as infant baptisms, 58,628, 9.5%, as the baptism of minors who are not infants, 29,752, or 4.8%, as adult baptisms, and 50,490 as receptions into full communion. Let's pause there. So that basically means that you had about 12.5% of people are converts that were entered into the church last year, and the rest are people who entered another way. Let's continue. In a previous article, I examined the first of the 4 categories and explored whether there is any correlation between birth rates in the nation states and infant baptism rates in the dioceses within those states. In this article, I examined the other categories, the 58,628 non-infant minors and 29,752 adults who were baptized, and the 50,490 baptized non-Catholic Christians, whether adults or minors, who were received into full communion. And by the way, under that 50,000 number are going to be people who entered the church that had been previously baptized, but maybe had been living a life functionally as an atheist and returned essentially to the faith that they've been baptized into, even if they never practiced. And I'd like to know how big that number is there. The stories of the 138,870 souls are, of course, varied. Non-infant receptions in the church include non-Christian adults who seek baptism after prayer and study, baptized non-Catholic adults who enter into full communion after prayer and study, teenagers and even preteens who, in their own initiative, seek baptism or entrance into full communion. The future Cardinal Wilton Gregory, for example, sought baptism when he was 11 years old. Non-infant children who receive the sacrament of baptism when a non-Christian parent is baptized. Non-infant children who receive the sacrament of baptism after a Catholic parent returns to the practice of the faith. Baptized non-Catholic minors who enter into full communion at the same time as non-Catholic parents. So that's what it means. Now, obviously, a single person entering into the church is good news, because it means that they now walk the path to salvation. Whether they make it or not, well, that depends on their cooperation with the grace freely offered by God. However, the numbers aren't very rosy. Aren't typically, and I'm going to show you this study now that people like to dispute, because not everybody takes things from a doom and gloom perspective, I guess, as one critic has said of me. Here's the headline from Catholic News Agency. Study, 9 in 10 cradle Catholics leaving the church. Experts urge stronger faith community. Sure, stronger faith community will help to a degree, but what will keep a lot of people in the church is actually teaching the faith. A lot of Catholics, a lot of them leave the faith because they say they're not being fed. What does that mean? How can you possibly not be fed when you're receiving the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ if you're in a state of grace in the Eucharist? How can you possibly not be being fed? But, when your standard homily on a Sunday is dad joke, maybe a little bit of stuff from the reading, but all presented in a way that cannot possibly offend, and that's like 90% of them, That might be what they mean by not being fed, because they're not being challenged to live a holier life. And instead, you often get these secularized homilies. Here are the details of this. It was published about a month ago. Talked about it when it was new. A recent study has found an increase in the number of American Catholics leaving the church. To combat the issue, the study's authors suggest creating stronger community ties among Catholics, especially among children. The data is from the General Social Survey, the GSS, which, as a social science researcher in my past, I had to work heavily with this data. It's a very good data set, one of the most comprehensive you will ever find. The GSS has asked a large representative sample of Americans a number of questions about religion for the past 50 years, which the authors analyzed to write Religious Transmission, a Solution to the Church's Biggest Problem, published by Notre Dame's Church Life Journal. The data revealed that in 1973, 84% of the participants raised Catholic still identified as Catholic when surveyed as adults, but in 2002 it was 74%. By 2022, it had dropped to 62%. In 1973, about 34% of participants raised Catholic were attending Mass weekly or more often when they were adults. By 2002, the number had fallen to 20%, and in 2022, it had fallen to 11%. 11% of cradle Catholics go to Mass on a regular basis. The study reported the church is losing 9 out of 10 cradle Catholics, and most are becoming religiously unaffiliated, meaning either non-denominational or, more likely, functionally atheist. Overall, there has been a decline in the number of Americans who prioritize faith. In 2013, 72% of Americans considered religion to be the most important thing in their lives, or among many important things. But in 2023, only 53% said the same. That means that the Catholic Church is losing cradle Catholics at a faster rate than the broader culture, than you're seeing in other denominations in the broader American culture. Want to know why that is? Just go look at how James Martin is treated by the hierarchy, as just one of countless examples of what happens. These declines are due to weaker social connections among Catholics, the values gap between Catholic morality and mainstream American morality, and the internet and smartphones, Rhoda told EWTN News Nightly in an August 13th interview. Notice I'm not mentioning the bishops. Typical. Before the 1950s, the average Catholic youth would have looked around in their social circle and seen a lot of consensus about faith, about the importance of worshiping God in some religion or denomination, Rhoda said. Today, it's not like that. Young Catholics are much more likely to have many non-Catholic friends, probably non-Catholic family members. In the culture at large, there's many anti-Catholic and anti-religious voices. So that puts pressure on youth as they grow up. Rhoda explained the values gap is a problem because in the 1930s, Catholic morality and mainstream American morality were very close. Now, on issues related to sexuality, marriage, life issues, they're quite the opposite. The last issue the research looked at is changes the internet has caused. Rhoda said when the internet hit the scene in the late 90s, we saw a huge spike in the percentage of youth who don't identify with any religion. Human beings are socialized by their families, their close social network, but also by the culture that they're in. What the internet and smartphones have done is change the balance of what's doing more work, end quote. I'm going to mention to you a Catholic YouTuber named Nick Cavazos. If you're not familiar with him, he's very much focused on the practice of the faith by younger people. And he's got a lot to say on it. I would suggest you check out his work if you are interested in that subject. You can find him on YouTube and TikTok and other places. There is a very real need in this space for people who will use the internet as a communications tool to reach young people. And you're not going to get that by putting on a tweed suit, lighting up a cigar or, an old fashioned pipe or something and, talking about, arcane details about things. You're not. It's simple as that. The church has a responsibility to spread the gospel on every medium possible and to do so in a way that is compelling to people. That does not mean selling the faith out to secular interests either. It means finding ways to communicate the truth to people who hunger for the truth. And the data shows that most of the converts coming in these days tend to be pretty young people who have categorically rejected a lot of the evils in the culture. And they're looking for the sacred. They're looking for stability. They're looking for truth. So few people are willing to give it to them. But that's why people are leaving. That's James Martin's treatment has to be on that list. The bishops and their obsession with politics Something I was really worried about last November and predicted, unfortunately, and was right, that they would be focused mostly on immigration and the environment and other things to basically be a counterforce against the Trump administration. Utter total waste of their time. Souls are on the line. And why they aren't focused on that is beyond me. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, please. I'm curious, do you think the church does enough to reach young people? Does the church do enough to reach average everyday people to keep them from leaving in the first place? Do you have an alternative idea as to why people say they're not being fed in the Catholic faith? Let me know what you think about this in the comments, please. So like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.